I'm going to start this review by giving you a rather hot take. I don't like exclusivity. I understand why it exists. I understand why it's important for platforms and consoles to have their unique selling points. But it's the fear of missing out of that exclusivity I don't personally like. And while I could save up the money and just buy a console so I can play those exclusives, I really don't want to. Such an investment for only a handful of games feels a little bit much. Now, what does that have to do with today's video? Simple. When I can't get access to certain franchises outside of certain alternatives, I will happily play the next best thing. And the next best thing in this case is Kaze and the Wild Masks. So if what I just mentioned wasn't hint enough, this game can be easily described as, I can't believe it's not Donkey Kong. All the elements are there. The cartoony characters, an environment that travels between whimsical, calm and melancholic, and the challenging gameplay of the golden age of the 90s is right there in a complete rabbit-shaped package. But in order to truly tell you how great this game is that it warranted such an intro, we need to start with the basics. In this game, we fly under the ears of our titular character Kaze, a young adventurer with a big love for exploration and treasure hunting. One day she made it to a floating island where she found an ancient artifact. Unfortunately for her, touching it causes a great evil to be unleashed into Carrotland and takes away her friend. So it's up to her to correct her mistake, defeat the enemies across the islands, and save her friend. And that's about it really. True to its inspirations, much of the story is just flavor to get you going, all without needing to say a single word. But more on that later. The real core of this game is in the platforming. Pure, unadulterated platforming. Kaze herself at her core plays a lot like Dixie Kong from the classic trilogy. She's got both speed and can glide with her ears, which are in far her greatest asset as she mostly uses them for almost everything. They're like a second pair of arms. With that skill set in mind is when the fun part begins. True to its inspiration, the levels are divided into a main route, 2 bonus levels, and the classic gathering of cards with letters that form Kaze's name. In theory, the core of the game is simply making it from beginning to end, true to any platformer you ever played, evading or defeating enemies, and all of it paced well enough to where you won't really feel too much of a difficulty spike until much later, because the game is little by little easing you into its mechanics. The fun part is, there is a variety of themes for the levels, so you are constantly feeling refreshed. You can go having a standard adventure, beating up evil vegetables on your way to the goal. You can be running around a winter wonderland with moving platforms and dangerous spikes, and stalactites that are ready to kill you the minute you walk below them. You can have a nice run through some ruins while being possessed by the lost mask of an ancient dragon, helpless to do anything about it other than avoid dying. You can be having a nice stroll in a nice calm cave, but oh my god, what is that thing? Get it away from me! See, this is the kind of magic I've been clamoring to see since the old days of the original Donkey Kong trilogy. Let me explain. The old Donkey Kong Country games were absolute experts in giving you amazing ambience and a variety in tones and moods based on which stage you were in. Sure, you may be playing as cartoony animals going on an adventure, but said adventure can be either a whimsical place full of cheerfulness, a place of calm melancholy, or a place of fear and dread. This goes very far into boosting your experience and giving more punch to your journey to the goal. And this game passes the test of nailing the tone and ambience with flying colors. But that's just the ambience. How about the rest of the gameplay? Well, despite what I'm about to mention in a moment, there is a lot of skill-based platforming going on, and all of it is distributed with some delicious pacing as I mentioned earlier. To elaborate, the early levels in the game are built in a way to ease you up to the main mechanics, how everything works, and then, once you are accustomed to them, the difficulty slowly ramps up. Now, you will think that as we get to the later stages, the difficulty will be too high or frustrating, but surprisingly, I found the difficulty of later levels to be challenging in a fun way. And I think a big part of the challenge is because there's no one-up system on a game over at all. Now, I know this sounds like it will make the game too easy or unchallenging. After all, you can just rush to the goal and still beat the game, but hear me out here. The game challenges you in 3 different ways when it comes to completing the stages, and in turn it makes them very replayable. In order to 100% the game, you need to grab 3 things. First, you need to collect at least 100 pink gems scattered around the levels. Then, you have to complete the hidden bonus stages, and finally, collect the 4 cards from Kaze's name. Without a one-up system or a failure state, it may sound like collecting everything is redundant, but in reality, every collectible has a purpose. Collecting all the bonuses in a world unlocks the hidden levels, aka this game's version of the lost levels. They are much harder compared to the main ones, and there is only 4 of them so they don't overstay their welcome. And the challenge they provide is very exciting, and you do want to unlock these, because they also contain pink gems, and grabbing all of them unlock you a different ending than if you simply beat the levels without doing much else. Some of you may be wondering, why worry about the story if I said earlier it's just flavor? Simple. Because the small bits and pieces of story we get do not have dialogue at all, this game does something I don't see often. It shows you, rather than telling you. And in turn, it lets you deduce what's happening on the story by yourself. Of course, having a story without words doesn't mean much if there isn't a backstory to back up what is shown during your playthrough. And that right there is the incentive for the third set of collectibles. Completing a level with all 4 Kaze's letter cards unlocks you a piece of backstory. At first I thought this was just concept art, something to have a bit of bragging rights, but as I started collecting them it turns out they are telling a story, the actual lore and backstory to what leads to the events of the game. There is some heavy Kung Fu Panda vibes to the story here, and I truly love it. You get to see how the titular masks and power-ups were created, you understand the motivation behind the antagonist, and you get to see why your main enemies are vegetables. On the topic of the masks, they are this game's version of the animal bodies. Among other things, they give an extra spice to the platforming and also come with their own set of skills. They're fun, and they got their own degree of difficulty. And while I know some don't like that some games wear their inspirations up their sleeves a little too much, I personally love it. I want to keep seeing new takes on old classics, especially if they make the game replayable, because that's the final layer to this game, the speedrunning. Beating every level unlocks the speedrun mode, not too different from how the old Crash Bandicoot trilogy did. Collectibles and checkpoints are removed, and you just have to get to the end as fast as possible. The fact I was able to get gold medals on every single level is a great testament to just how tight both the controls and the level design are. How it lets me think outside the box, and how I can use all that, plus what I learned during my first run of each level, to ace them for a full no damage speedrun. Also, the fact I even did a second playthrough where I speedrun the game in less than 2 hours is just a testament to how amazing this game is. My only real critique of it is that it left me wanting more, and I want to see a sequel because that's just how much I loved it. Any bit of frustration or any moment where I found myself dying or brute forcing my way into a perfect run right away were all on me. Never did I feel like blaming the game for my own failings, and thanks to that, I came out of the game more satisfied. So with everything said and done, yeah, I think this is a perfect game, and I can't recommend it enough. Especially if, like me, you grew up with some of the best platformers to come out of the 90s. I am seriously hoping, praying even that we get to see a sequel. This is the kind of games I want to see succeed, because the only thing better than replaying the classics is to play new games that take the classics and make something new with them. Only time will tell if we can continue to see amazing gems like this, but until then, I'll be more than happy to keep digging through my Steam library to see just what kind of treasures are buried within it.